Well, this is Pops. This is what I'm calling the other stuff of 2023. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I didn't do a video. And sometimes I'll tell you why. Maybe I don't have a reason. Maybe I just didn't get to it. But let's talk about some of these projects, films, and whatnots that I didn't get to. And let me start with Dungeons and Dragons. That's right. 2022 teased a movie that didn't give me the warm and fuzzies. And then, of course, all the insider references and Easter eggs and things that I didn't get. And then the behind the scenes stuff with all of the Wizards of the Coast and the D&D stuff. It's like, well, should I give them money or not? And blah, blah, blah. And then it comes out and it was fine. And it had been so long. I didn't have, much to say about it. It was pretty much what I thought and maybe like this much better than I thought. Like literally, it was just sort of like, okay, 2.5, maybe 2.5 out of 5. It's fine. I got to be honest. I think Chris Pine was one of my least favorite aspects of the film, of that whole, I don't know. There were things that worked and things that didn't work. And I was just very meh about it. So that's kind of my take on why I didn't do anything on D&D. Next up would probably be Equalizer 3. Came out at the end of the year. Heard some really good things about it. Oh, it's gonna be fun. It's almost. I heard things like it's a toxic film and it's whatever. And I watch it and I'm like, okay. I really liked the first one. Second one was fine. And I found this one to be pretty boring. I didn't hate it, but does not hold a candle to the predecessors and was kind of let down. It fortunately wasn't like excessively long. I didn't feel like they were taking advantage of me like they have with like other films. So I didn't do a video per se, but I also didn't feel like, what was I saying? It's a Midland film. It was fine. It was fine. And that's kind of where I end up with these kind of things like that. Another one, though, this one was, this is a film that was on my radar screen to do a review. I had notes on this film, and it's like no one was talking about it. And then I was like, oh, I'll get to it. Didn't get to it. Then I had Halloween. It's like everything just kept getting bumped ahead of it, getting bumped ahead of it. And after a while, it was like, how come I'm not doing a review about Death's Roulette? Death's Roulette, if you haven't seen or know anything about it, it is a Mexican horror film, very much in the vein of like the Saw movies, right? It has to do with like puzzle solving and can the people navigate through the next little maze or trick or puzzle and those kinds of things. And the problem was, because we have these 7 people who wake up in a mansion, they have to play this game, someone's going to die, no one volunteers, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, it was like Mexican Saw with like a Scream dilemma. What is a Scream dilemma? The Scream dilemma is you've only introduced so many characters, so therefore it's like playing the game Clue with me, and I can figure out who the killer is through process of elimination. It worked once for Scream, and then after that, I'm kind of on to the game, and I kind of know what to expect. It's almost like when you watch a Law and Order episode, and you know the formula, so you know the person that they think did it in the first 20 minutes is never going to be the guilty person. That would be the by the way, that would be the Law and Order episode I would write. The person they had at the beginning that they let go is actually the person. Just spoiler alert. But Death Through Roulette was just sort of like a generic letdown. The ending's very forced because it was not a redemptive game. It was more like a revenge game. It turns out the killer is among them, playing alongside of them, and it was about getting revenge. It was never about a chance that they could actually win. Like it never ever was really on the plate. And that's what Saw works. Saw only works whenever it was like a morality quest, a morality problem for them to work out. If they could do the right thing, they could survive, even if it meant there were repercussions. Death Roulette never went there. It was just very generic. So kind of become a 2-star thing for me. It's like, didn't totally hate it. I get why some people might like it more than me, but that's my take on it. That's why there was never a review. All right. This is a post-apocalyptic comedy action video game adaptation with Anthony Mackie called Twisted Metal. Didn't know it was a video game, not a gamer. I know, I know. Many of you are shocked by that news, right? I'm a gamer. So I watched an episode or two. Once we had Killer Clowns. Yes, Killer Clown and Pops do not do well. I don't do clowns. And for those of you who don't know that, I'll put a link in the description for the Vex video about clowns. Yeah, I'm making a note about the clown link. For those of you who don't know, I don't do clowns. But I have to be honest, the main reason I just didn't go on with the show or give it more time was I felt it was very, very flat and cardboard. Like Anthony Mackie's character has this sort of like fun, charismatic feel who delivers these really bad lines. Like it just, and maybe that's directly from the video game, and that's totally cool. And if you're down with that, it very much was the Five Nights at Freddy's thing for people who love that movie. It's because of all the Easter egg. It was the Easter egg love, and those are like the marshmallows and your Lucky Charms. The problem is if I don't know they're Easter eggs, there's no marshmallows in my Lucky Charms. I'm just getting Lucky Charms, and there's no marshmallows, so it doesn't taste as good. If that's the case with Twisted Metal, I get that people like the show, but for me, didn't care for it, and again, not in a hated it way, just more like, and I could have done a video. Like my notes on this was more like, do I do a video and open the door of folks to help me get it? Kind of the way I did like the Last of Us, where I did like the noob version, but it was never interesting enough for that, is how I felt. So Twisted Metal didn't make the cut this year, guys. Sorry about that. All right, over in the comic book side, Nightclub by Mark Miller. Now, Mark Miller has become, if not one of the best creator right now as far as stories goes. They're at least action-packed. They appear to be written for the screen, so obviously a Netflix deal makes sense. All those kinds of things are in place. I've had lots of love for Big Game, King of Spies, some of the different things. Well, he did Nightclub, right? Wakasashi's Tea House loved it. It's basically a YA vampire story. Read it like super fast. Like it's a short read. It's just a little mini series. Other people liked it, and I was very much meh. And I'm meh because of the characters' motivations or lack thereof. They're teens who just foolhardily, without thought, jump into being vampires. Like, so the premise is, dude's like crazy trying to be a YouTube content creator, right? Doing like the whole is it called parkour thing, right? Where you do like crazy stunts and stuff. He gets hurt, he's gonna die. So a vampire comes along, makes him a vampire, and says, I need vampires in my army, we're the good guys, blah, blah, blah. Well, then he just goes and convinces his friends to do it, and now they're suddenly vampires. And I'm like, there was no like thoughts of like what this actually meant. Like, now I didn't hate the way they kind of navigate through like not going to school or different things like that. But the one thing I didn't like was this random, all the normal rules apply to what vampire rules are. But it was like they had this thing about hypnosis. They can hypnotize someone, power of suggestion, that never ever felt like a vampire thing to me. Like it's used not as I have you in a trance so I can bite you. It's like, you didn't see me leave the hospital, I'm fine. I'm like, that's completely different. So it wasn't hypnosis, it was brainwashing. So it's a completely different thing. So I was totally taken out of the early portion of the book where that was all the case. And then the last half of the book is basically like a biker war versus our teen vampire thing. And it was kind of this weird, contrived, like sped up ending. And I just didn't care for it. I didn't do a video because I read it so fast and then just kind of had it in a note to do a video, and just kind of like the time kept going and I just hadn't done a video, and it just seemed like there's a good time to do one. So it just didn't happen. So I'm very ho-hum on it. Probably 2.5 to 3 stars out of 5. Not bad. I wouldn't even be opposed to rereading it and revisiting it or discussing it in more detail, but I was just very ho-hum. And I think at the time I probably even had more passion about the problems than I even do now. That's how it didn't even stick with me. All right. Speaking of losing interest, I had a video and notes and researched The history of Blue Beetle, because when the Blue Beetle trailers and some of the stuff landed, and Zolo is a decent enough actor, I thought Blue Beetle might actually be kind of like a sleeper thing, kind of the way Shazam was the first time. And I had all this stuff together. And then as we saw the trailer drop with George Lopez and the comments about Batman, and then we saw how cheap and cheesy it felt as a knockoff of Spider-Man, Iron Man, and everything else, and then the Gunverse stuff was coming to light, whatever, my interest level was very quickly into apathy. I didn't I just did not care. So the reason y'all didn't get my Blue Beetle history lessons and things to whatever, and all this stuff from Charlton to DC, which led to Crisis on Infinite Earth and all, the reason you didn't get any of that, because it just got to the point where I just didn't care anymore. And I don't. I really am like, I feel like I almost wasted time revisiting all this Blue Beetle stuff because at the end of the day, who knows? So anyway, that's kind of where that ended. More good read, bad read, don't reads. This was a thing that I kind of played with early on in the year, and like leading from transitioning from last year into this year. It's kind of the way I would do like three different stories, and I kind of like give you a thing, and it become like way too much work for what I was doing. Like I didn't feel like I was ever giving you enough value for any particular story, and yet I felt like I was doing a lot of work to get through three different things. I got to find three different things. I got to make sure I try to kind of figure out how do I categorize them, and so the reason that the don't read, go read, must read thing kind of fell apart was because it just kind of didn't work. It didn't land. So this is kind of like that. This is that video where he explained where sometimes things you think can be a good idea or work out can end up being either they don't work, or in this case, they don't really work, but they also require a lot more effort than they need to. Where I could just do a review, I could just share a screen, talk about some things, and then kind of move on. And that kind of lended itself to be a better fit for me creating content, doing videos, and interacting with you guys. So, I think that. All right, so I don't know if this is something that you enjoyed or not, but this is a little bit more of that inside Pops's brain thing where it's like how I operate, how I have notes. I like have all these notes and all these different things. Sometimes things just don't make the list. And I probably could keep going in this video about other things that are sort of like on the to-do list that I kind of never got to. Like there are stories that I never really got to. I didn't really ever talk about Squid Game, the reality show. I never did finish Nas's Watto video this year. Didn't get to that. Taika Waititi talking about how he basically did Thor for the money, things like that. It's just sometimes there's a lot of cost, benefit, time management, all sorts of things that go into it. So I thought it would be a kind of a part of the wrap up of this year was to do a video like this. So there you go. You guys can tell me what you think. And maybe you'll have some other things where you're like, no, you should do a video on this one, or what about this one, or something like that. So I'm open. You know how it is, guys. Talk to me about it. Take care, everybody. I am Pops.